The office was dimly lit, the glow from the city skyline casting long shadows across the mahogany desk. Olivia Grayson sat in silence, staring at the small white envelope on her desk. Her hands shook as she tore it open, her breath hitching when her eyes landed on the single, fateful word: positive. Her world tilted. The pregnancy test result confirmed the unthinkable. She was carrying Richard Blackwell's child, the ruthless CEO who had risen through the corporate ranks by trampling anyone in his way. But to Olivia, he wasn't just a boss. He was the man she had naively given her heart to. Tears blurred her vision, but she blinked them away, refusing to let weakness consume her. She had been nothing more than a temporary distraction to him, a dalliance that ended the moment he got what he wanted. Richard had made it clear. It was a mistake, Olivia. Forget it ever happened. But she couldn't forget. Not now. A sudden knock on the door made her jump. She shoved the letter into her purse just as the man himself strode in, his powerful presence filling the room. "Olivia, are those reports ready?" Richard asked brusquely, not bothering to look up from his phone. "Yes, Mr. Blackwell," she murmured, willing her voice to remain steady. He paused, finally meeting her gaze. Something flickered in his eyes, something almost soft. But then it was gone, replaced by the cold detachment she had come to expect. "Good," he said, turning to leave. "And Olivia, remember what I said. No distractions." With that, he was gone, leaving her alone with her secret. But as Olivia reached for her purse, her phone buzzed. An unknown number flashed on the screen, and she hesitated before answering. "Hello?" A distorted voice crackled through the line. "You think you can hide this? Leave now, before it's too late." The line went dead. Olivia's heart raced. Who knew? And what did they want? One thing was clear. She needed to leave the company before Richard found out, but something told her. It was already too late. As Olivia turns to pack her things, she notices a shadow moving outside her window, someone watching her every move. Richard Blackwell sat behind the massive glass desk of his corner office, the city of skyscrapers sprawling beneath him like a kingdom under his control. His hand wrapped around a glass of scotch as he reviewed the latest merger documents, his mind calculating the next move in his empire's expansion. Every deal, every acquisition had been orchestrated to cement his dominance in the corporate world. But tonight, something nagged at him, an uneasy whisper in the back of his mind that no amount of success could drown out. Olivia Grayson. He hadn't thought about her in years. That brief affair was a mistake, something that had happened in a moment of weakness. She was bright, yes, and had a kind of natural charm that made him drop his guard. But when it was over, Richard had pushed it aside, buried it deep, and moved on. Yet lately, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had overlooked something. Every success seemed a little hollower, every victory a little more tainted. Was it regret? No, he didn't regret his rise to power. He'd done what was necessary, but... Her face, her name, kept creeping into his thoughts. A ping on his phone interrupted the silence. Richard glanced at the screen and frowned. Another anonymous message. The third one this week. "You can't run from your past forever, Richard." He scrolled through the previous ones. "Secrets never stay buried. Olivia remembers. Do you?" His hand tightened around the phone. Was this some kind of prank? Someone trying to spook him before the upcoming merger? He deleted the message, dismissing it as nonsense, and turned back to his documents. But the unease remained, lingering just beneath the surface. Just as Richard is about to lock his phone, it pings again. This time, a single photo appears, a grainy image of Olivia standing outside her apartment, looking over her shoulder as though she knows she's being watched. 25 years. Olivia had built her life on that number. The years of struggle, pain, and sacrifice that marked her journey from that fateful day when she walked out of Richard's office for good. She had never looked back, or at least she had told herself that. In reality, Richard's shadow had never truly left her. It lingered in her thoughts whenever she watched her son, Ethan, grow up without a father. Ethan was her world now, At 24, he was a brilliant young man, driven, intelligent, and ambitious like his father, though he had no idea who that man was. Olivia had vowed never to tell him the truth. Richard Blackwell didn't deserve to know the incredible son he had abandoned. Ethan deserved better. "Mom, you okay?" Ethan's voice brought her back from her thoughts. He stood in the kitchen doorway, concern in his eyes. Olivia smiled, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Just thinking, honey. Big day at work?" "Yeah, we closed another deal. My startup's doing better than I thought it would. We've got some new investors looking at us." His smile was genuine, full of pride. Olivia felt her heart swell with love and a pang of worry. Ethan was on his way to becoming a successful man, just like his father. She feared that one day the secrets of the past would catch up to him. She feared they already had. After Ethan left for the night, Olivia sat at her small dining table, staring at the flickering candlelight. For years, she had lived in the quiet suburbs, working at a small law firm to provide for her son. The shadow of Richard's power never reached them here, or so she thought. She fumbled with her purse, pulling out the old letters she had kept. The anonymous messages she had received back when she was pregnant, warning her to stay away from Richard. She had ignored them, choosing to protect Ethan from Richard's world. But now, as the messages resumed, her instincts told her she couldn't hide forever. As she mulled over these thoughts, the doorbell rang. Olivia tensed. Who would come at this hour? She hesitated before opening the door, and when she did, her breath caught. A young man stood before her, tall and confident, but his face was all too familiar. He had Richard's piercing blue eyes, his sharp features. But this wasn't Ethan. "I'm Noah," he said, his voice calm yet intense. "We need to talk. It's about Richard Blackwell." Noah steps forward, looking straight into Olivia's eyes. "I'm Richard's son, but I'm not the only one. You need to protect Ethan before it's too late." Olivia could barely breathe as she let Noah into her home. This wasn't happening. Richard had another son? And why was he here now, after all these years? "What do you mean, I need to protect Ethan?" Olivia's voice was tight, barely concealing the panic she felt rising. Noah sighed, running a hand through his dark hair, the same shade as Richard's had been when they first met. "Richard's enemies know about you, about Ethan. They've been watching. I don't know how much time you have, but if you don't act now, they'll come for him." Olivia's mind raced. "Enemies? What are you talking about? Why would anyone be after Ethan? He has nothing to do with Richard." Noah leaned forward, his voice lowering. "Richard's company is under attack. A man named Jonathan Graves is behind it. A former business partner, someone Richard betrayed a long time ago. He spent years plotting his revenge, and now he's going after everything Richard cares about." Olivia shook her head. "But Richard doesn't care about Ethan. He never did." Noah's eyes softened. "That's not entirely true. He's been searching for you both, but not out of guilt. Graves knows about Ethan. He knows that Richard has a son out there, and he's planning to use him as leverage to bring Richard down." Olivia felt the world spin around her. This wasn't supposed to happen. She had kept Ethan safe, kept him far away from Richard's world. But now, it seemed that world was closing in on them. "I won't let him hurt Ethan," she whispered, more to herself than to Noah. "I won't let anyone hurt him." Noah stood, his gaze steely. "You may not have a choice. Graves is dangerous, and he won't stop until he gets what he wants. I came here to warn you, but we need to move fast. There's more at play here than you realize." Noah pulls out a photo from his jacket, a picture of Ethan leaving his office, taken only hours earlier. "They're already watching him, Olivia. We need to make our move before they do." Across the city, Ethan sat in his sleek office reviewing the latest proposal from a potential investor. His tech startup was gaining momentum, attracting interest from investors he had only dreamed of working with. But something about this deal felt off. The investor, a man named Martin Cross, had appeared out of nowhere, offering a substantial buyout that would catapult Ethan's company to the next level. On paper, it looked perfect. Too perfect. Ethan leaned back in his chair, staring at the contract. His instincts were screaming at him to dig deeper, to look beyond the flashy numbers, but he couldn't figure out what was wrong. A knock on his door startled him. "Ethan Grayson?" A deep voice called from the doorway. Ethan looked up to see a man standing there, tall and serious. His eyes were piercing, his presence commanding. "I'm Noah Blackwell," the man said, stepping inside. "We need to talk. It's about your father." Ethan blinked, confusion etched across his face. "My father? What are you talking about? I don't have a father." Noah sighed. "You don't know the whole story, Ethan, but I do, and if you want to stay alive, you'll listen." Noah sits across from Ethan, sliding a photo across the desk. "You've been living a lie, Ethan. Richard Blackwell is your father, and everything you thought you knew is about to change." Ethan's world spun as the weight of Noah's words sank in. Richard Blackwell. His father? It was impossible, absurd. His mother had always been honest with him, hadn't she? She had said his father left before he was born, never even looked back. But something about Noah's presence, his intensity, made Ethan pause. He wanted to dismiss the man in front of him, call security, and forget this ever happened. But deep down, a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, there was a sliver of truth in what Noah was saying. "Why should I believe you?" Ethan finally managed, his voice tight with restrained anger. "My mother raised me alone. My father, whoever he is, was never part of my life." Noah leaned forward, his expression serious. "I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to listen because your life might depend on it." He pulled a folder from his jacket and placed it on Ethan's desk. "Go through these. Look at the dates, the transactions, the connections. It all points to Richard Blackwell as your biological father. And if you don't believe me, ask your mother." Ethan's hand hovered over the folder, trembling. But he didn't open it. He couldn't. At least, not yet. "What do you want from me?" he asked, struggling to maintain control over the chaos swirling in his mind. Noah sighed, sitting back. "It's not about what I want. It's about what Graves wants. He's targeting you, Ethan, because you're a loose end. You're leverage against Richard, the one thing he can use to destroy everything Richard built." Ethan shook his head slowly. "That doesn't make sense. Why would some ex-business partner want to ruin my life? I've never even met this man." "Because it's not just about business. It's personal. Graves is obsessed with revenge. He believes Richard betrayed him years ago, and he's been waiting for the perfect time to strike back. He's planning to use you and your mother to hit Richard where it hurts most." Ethan stared at Noah, his heart pounding. His mother. The thought of Olivia being dragged into some corporate war made his blood boil. "If what you're saying is true," he said quietly, "then what do I need to do?" Noah's gaze was steady. "You need to confront your mother, find out the truth, and then you need to stay out of sight until we figure out what Graves is planning next." Ethan clenched his jaw. Everything inside him screamed that this was insane. But something about Noah's urgency made him want to find out more. He needed answers, if not for himself, then for his mother's safety. He stood abruptly, grabbing his coat. "I'm going to see her. If what you're saying is a lie, I'll make sure you regret ever coming here." Noah nodded, unflinching. "I understand. Just be careful, Ethan. You're not the only one looking for answers." As Ethan storms out, Noah's phone buzzes. A message appears on the screen. "He's moving faster than we thought. Keep him away from Blackwell's headquarters at all costs." Noah's face darkens as he watches Ethan disappear through the office doors. "I hope you know what you're doing, little brother." Ethan drove through the city in a blur of confusion and anger. His heart pounded as he pulled up to the small house he had grown up in, a place filled with memories of laughter, warmth, and, until now, the belief that his mother had never lied to him. But what if she had? He pushed open the front door, his mind a storm of questions. "Mom?" he called out, his voice strained. Olivia appeared in the hallway, surprise flickering across her face. "Ethan, what are you doing here? Is everything okay?" "No, it's not." He stalked forward, the folder Noah had given him clutched tightly in his hand. Who is Richard Blackwell? Olivia froze. The color drained from her face, and she reached out as if to steady herself. Ethan, Tell me the truth, Mom, he demanded, his voice rising. Who is he? And why is some guy claiming he's my father? Tears welled up in Olivia's eyes. She looked at him, her expression shattered, and for a moment Ethan almost wished she would deny it, tell him Noah was a liar, that it was all some cruel joke. But she didn't. He is your father, Olivia whispered, her voice breaking. I'm sorry, Ethan. I never wanted you to find out like this. The air seemed to leave the room. Ethan staggered back, shaking his head. You lied to me? My whole life you lied about who I am? I did it to protect you, Olivia pleaded, stepping closer. Richard was dangerous. He didn't want us. He abandoned you, Ethan finished bitterly. He left you when you were pregnant and never looked back. Olivia's silence was answer enough. The anger swelled inside Ethan, burning hotter than he thought possible. All these years he had idolized his mother for her strength, her resilience. But now that image was crumbling, replaced by a cold, bitter truth. Who else knows? He asked, his voice tight. Does he know about me? Olivia shook her head frantically. No, he doesn't. I left before he found out. I never wanted him to have any claim on you. But there were others, people in his circle. They threatened me, told me to stay away. I thought we were safe. Ethan laughed harshly. Safe? Some guy named Noah just showed up at my office telling me that I'm in danger, that Graves is coming for us. Olivia's face paled. Noah? He found you? Yeah, and he seems to know a hell of a lot more than I do. Olivia's eyes darted around the room, panic rising. We need to leave. We can't stay here. If Noah found you, it means they're close. Who, Mom? Who's close? Graves, Olivia whispered, her voice trembling. He's been hunting us for years, waiting for a chance to use you to destroy Richard. You're the key, Ethan. If he finds you, he'll destroy everything. Ethan's heart raced. This was madness. Just hours ago, he had been living a normal life, running his business, believing in the stability of his world. Now, everything was unraveling. What do we do? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Olivia took a deep breath, her eyes fierce with determination. We go to Richard. He's the only one who can protect you now. Just as they're about to leave, the sound of shattering glass echoes through the house. Ethan spins around to see a dark figure stepping through the broken window, gun in hand. Too late, the intruder sneers. Graves sends his regards. Ethan moved instinctively, grabbing his mother and pulling her behind the kitchen counter as a gunshot rang out. The bullet buried itself in the wall behind them, sending plaster flying. Stay down, he hissed, his heart pounding. But Olivia wasn't listening. She reached into the cabinet beside them and pulled out a small, black handgun. Mom? Ethan stared at her in shock. Olivia's hands were steady as she cocked the weapon, her eyes fierce. You think I didn't prepare for this? Before he could respond, Olivia stood and fired 2 shots in quick succession. The intruder yelped in pain, dropping his gun as he staggered back. Let's go, Olivia commanded, grabbing Ethan's arm and pulling him toward the back door. They stumbled out into the night, adrenaline coursing through their veins. Ethan's mind was a whirlwind of confusion and fear. Who was his mother? How had she known this would happen? But there was no time for questions. All he knew was that they were running for their lives. Where are we going? He gasped as they sprinted toward the car. Olivia's eyes were hard. To see Richard. As they drive away, Ethan glances in the rearview mirror and sees another car pull out from the shadows, headlights blazing. They're being followed. The car roared down the highway, headlights cutting through the darkness. Olivia's knuckles were white as she gripped the steering wheel, eyes focused on the road ahead. Ethan glanced nervously over his shoulder at the black SUV trailing them. Whoever these people were, they weren't giving up. We're being followed, Ethan said through gritted teeth. I know, Olivia replied, her voice tense. But I have a place we can go, somewhere they won't find us. Ethan's mind raced. Every word out of his mother's mouth seemed to twist his perception of reality even further. The gun, her calm precision under fire, this wasn't the mother he knew. This was someone hardened by years of fear and secrecy. "Mom," he began, hesitantly. "What haven't you told me? Who are these people?" Olivia's jaw tightened. "They're Graves' men. After I left Richard, I tried to disappear, but someone, one of his enemies, wanted to make sure I stayed gone. They kept tabs on me, made sure I never reached out to him. When Ethan was born, they made me promise to keep his identity a secret. Or else." "Or else what?" Ethan demanded. "Or else they'd kill us both," Olivia whispered, glancing at him with a look that made his blood run cold. "But it seems the rules have changed. Graves is making his move, and you're right in the middle of it." Ethan's heart pounded. "Why? Why does he care so much about me?" "Because you're Richard's heir," Olivia said simply. "The last card he has to play. And in the right hands you could destroy everything Richard built." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. But before Ethan could respond, the SUV behind them surged forward, ramming into their back bumper. "Hold on!" Olivia shouted, jerking the wheel as the car skidded onto a side road. They tore through a deserted industrial area, tires screeching as Olivia pushed the car to its limits. Another hit, harder this time. The vehicle shuddered, metal scraping against metal. "We can't outrun them," Ethan yelled. "We don't have to," Olivia shot back, her eyes narrowing. "We just need to buy some time." With a sudden swerve, she spun the car down an alley and killed the headlights. They slid to a stop in the shadows of an abandoned factory, the engine ticking softly as the SUV thundered past. Ethan held his breath, listening as the sound of the pursuing vehicle faded into the distance. "Is it over?" he whispered. Olivia shook her head. "Not even close." She reached into the glove compartment, pulling out a burner phone. With a quick swipe, she dialed a number and waited, her gaze never leaving the rearview mirror. "Who are you calling?" Ethan asked, suspicion flaring. "Someone who can help," she murmured. The line clicked, and a deep voice rumbled through the speaker. "Olivia?" Ethan's stomach twisted. He knew that voice. He'd heard it on TV, in interviews, in the business world. It was authoritative, powerful, one that demanded respect. "Richard," Olivia said softly, and Ethan's heart nearly stopped. "We need to meet." There was a pause, then the voice replied, cool and measured. "Is it him?" "Yes," Olivia said quietly. "It's Ethan." The silence that followed was palpable, stretching into eternity. Finally, Richard spoke again, his tone edged with something Ethan couldn't quite identify. "Regret? Pain? Bring him to the safe house. We'll talk there." The call ends, and Olivia turns to Ethan, her face set in grim determination. "It's time you met your father." The safe house was nothing like Ethan expected. Tucked away in the hills outside the city, it looked more like a luxury estate than a hideout. Tall iron gates loomed ahead as Olivia drove up the winding road, the tension between them crackling like static electricity. Ethan had imagined this moment countless times over the years, meeting his father, demanding answers, maybe even confronting him for leaving. But now that it was actually happening, all he felt was numbness, a hollow emptiness where anger should have been. They pulled up to the house, and the door swung open before they even had a chance to knock. Richard Blackwell stood in the doorway, his figure silhouetted against the dim light inside. He was older than Ethan had expected. His hair streaked with silver, lines of weariness etched into his face. But his eyes, those same piercing blue eyes that stared back at Ethan from the mirror every morning. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Neither spoke, neither moved. "Come inside," Richard said at last, his voice low. He stepped back, allowing them entry. The interior of the safe house was sleek and modern, every surface polished to perfection. Ethan felt like he'd stepped into another world, a place where every detail screamed wealth and power. But there was no comfort here, only cold, sterile precision. "Ethan," Richard said quietly, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Sit." Ethan sat, his heart pounding as he met his father's gaze. He had a million questions, 1,000 accusations, but the words caught in his throat. Richard looked at Olivia, a flicker of something unreadable passing through his eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked softly. Olivia's chin lifted. "You didn't want us, remember? I did what I had to do to keep him safe." "Safe?" Richard's voice hardened. "He's anything but safe now, Olivia." Ethan finally found his voice. "Enough," he snapped, glaring at both of them. "I don't care about your past. I want to know why I'm in danger. What the hell is going on?" Richard's gaze shifted to him, assessing, calculating. "You're in danger because Jonathan Graves is a man who believes in an eye for an eye, and he thinks you're the perfect weapon to destroy me." "Why?" Ethan demanded. "What did you do to him?" Richard's expression darkened. "Graves was once my business partner. We built this empire together, but his ambitions outgrew his loyalty. He started making deals behind my back, leveraging power for his own gain. When I found out, I cut him off, shut down his operations. He lost everything. And now he wants revenge," Ethan finished bitterly. "And I'm supposed to be his leverage?" "Yes," Richard said simply. "But it's not just about you. It's about your mother, too. If he gets his hands on you, he'll use you both to ruin everything I've built." Ethan leaned forward, his anger flaring again. "Why should I care about what you built? You weren't there for us. You didn't even know I existed." Richard flinched, just slightly, but it was enough. For a moment, the mask of power slipped, revealing a man haunted by his own mistakes. "You're right," Richard said quietly. "I made choices I can't undo. But I'm here now, and I'm asking you to trust me. Because if we don't stop Graves, he won't just take down my company, he'll destroy you too." Ethan stared at him, his mind spinning. Trust him? This stranger who had abandoned them? Who had left his mother to raise him alone? But what choice did he have? "Okay," Ethan said at last, his voice tight. "I'll help. But when this is over, you and I are going to have a long conversation about what it means to be a father." Richard nodded slowly. "Fair enough." Just as the tension eases, Richard's phone buzzes. He glances at the screen, his face tightening. "He's here," Richard murmurs, looking up at Ethan and Olivia. "Graves just arrived." A cold wind swept through the room as Richard peered out the window. A black car had pulled up at the bottom of the hill, its headlights slicing through the darkness. Graves was here. "Stay inside," Richard ordered, his gaze locked on the intruding vehicle. "I'll handle this." Ethan's heart pounded. "You think I'm just going to sit here while he's coming after me? No way. I'm going out there." "Ethan, listen to me," Richard began, but Ethan cut him off. "I'm not a kid anymore. If Graves wants to use me as a pawn, then I'm going to make damn sure he knows I'm not playing." Before Richard could protest, Ethan turned and strode toward the door, his mother's voice calling after him in fear. "Ethan, please, don't." But Ethan was already gone, stepping out into the cold night air to confront the man who had hunted him his entire life. Graves steps out of the car, a slow, mocking smile spreading across his face as he sees Ethan. "Well, well, the Blackwell heir, finally standing up. Let's see if you're as strong as your father thinks you are." The tension crackled in the night air as Ethan stood face to face with the man who had haunted his life without him even knowing it. Jonathan Graves. A name whispered in fear, a shadow lurking behind every success and every downfall of Richard Blackwell's empire. But now, as the two faced off under the cold glow of the moon, there was no room for fear. There was only determination. "You're braver than I thought," Graves drawled, his eyes glinting with dark amusement. "Stepping out to meet me head-on. I expected you to hide behind your father." "I'm not my father," Ethan spat, his voice steady despite the adrenaline pounding through his veins. "I don't run from a fight." "No," Graves murmured thoughtfully, circling him slowly. "But you're still just a boy, caught in the crossfire of something you don't understand." "Maybe," Ethan conceded, forcing himself to hold Graves's gaze. "But I understand this. Whatever grudge you have against Richard, it ends tonight. You're not using me to get to him. I'm done being a pawn in your twisted game." Graves's smile widened. "Oh, I don't think you understand, Ethan. This isn't just about your father, it's about legacy, power, and bringing down everything he ever valued, including you." Before Ethan could react, Graves raised his hand and two armed men stepped out from the shadows, guns leveled at him. "Stop!" Richard's voice rang out, clear and commanding. He strode forward, his gaze locked on Graves. "This is between you and me, Graves. Leave him out of it." Graves turned slowly, his smile fading. "Always the savior, aren't you, Richard? Trying to protect your family now, after abandoning them for so long?" Richard's jaw tightened. "Whatever you think I did, whatever betrayal you believe I committed, it doesn't justify dragging my son into this." Graves's eyes darkened, the fury of decades of resentment flashing across his face. "You took everything from me, Richard. My business, my reputation, my future, and now I'm going to take the one thing you have left, your family." A gunshot echoed through the night. Ethan flinched, bracing himself for pain, but none came. Slowly, he opened his eyes to see Graves staring down at his own chest, shock etched across his features. Behind him, Olivia stood, her hands steady around the gun she had just fired. "Step away from my son," she said quietly. Graves staggered, his face contorted in rage. You! But before he could finish, another shot rang out. This time, Richard fired, the bullet tearing through Graves's shoulder. The man crumpled to the ground, gasping in pain. "It's over," Richard said coldly, his gun still trained on the fallen man. "You've lost." For a long moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, slowly, the armed men behind Graves lowered their weapons, stepping back. It was over. The nightmare, the threats, the years of fear, they were finally over. Ethan took a deep breath, his body trembling as the adrenaline drained away. He looked at his father, then at his mother, and felt something shift inside him. They weren't just individuals caught in a web of betrayal and revenge anymore. They were a family, a broken, scarred, but unbroken family. Graves' eyes burned with hatred as he looked up at Richard, blood staining his shirt. "You think this is the end?" he rasped. "This isn't over, Richard. It's never over." Richard knelt down beside him, his gaze icy. "Yes, it is. You tried to destroy us, but all you did was make us stronger, and now you're going to spend the rest of your life paying for what you've done." With a swift motion, Richard signaled to the security team that had emerged from the house. They stepped forward, hauling Graves to his feet as the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. Ethan watched as the man who had terrorized them was dragged away, a strange sense of finality settling over him. "It's over," Olivia murmured beside him, her voice soft but firm. "You're safe now, Ethan." Ethan turned to look at her, then at Richard. For so long he had been caught between anger and confusion, resentment and yearning. But in this moment, something inside him shifted. Maybe forgiveness wasn't about forgetting the past. Maybe it was about choosing to build something new despite it. "Let's go home," Ethan said quietly. Richard hesitated, pain flickering in his eyes. "Ethan, But Ethan shook his head. "We have a lot to talk about, but not tonight." Richard nodded slowly, understanding. "Of course." Olivia stepped forward, placing a hand on Ethan's arm. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered, "for standing up, for fighting, for being more than either of us ever imagined." Ethan swallowed hard, emotions churning in his chest. "I didn't do it alone," he said, looking at both his parents. "We did it together." 6 months later, the sun shone brightly over a gleaming skyscraper in downtown New York. Blackwell Industries had survived the storm, barely. The company's name had been dragged through the mud, but against all odds, it had emerged stronger, leaner, and with a renewed sense of purpose. Ethan stood at the top of the building, gazing out over the city. So much had changed since that night. Graves had been convicted of multiple crimes, his empire dismantled, his influence shattered. Richard had stepped down as CEO, ceding control of the company to a new board and taking on an advisory role. And Ethan had found his place in the world. He wasn't just the heir to the Blackwell legacy, he was his own man, forging a new path for himself and for the company. A path built not on secrets and lies but on transparency and integrity. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. He turned to see Olivia standing there, a gentle smile on her face. "Ready?" she asked. Ethan nodded. Together, they walked down to the conference room where Richard was waiting. As they entered, Richard looked up, his expression a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "Ethan," he said quietly, "thank you for coming." Ethan took a deep breath, then stepped forward. "We're family, aren't we?" he said, his voice steady. "We're going to figure this out. One step at a time." A flicker of relief passed over Richard's face, and he nodded. Yes, one step at a time. They sat down together, the past still lingering between them, but no longer a barrier. It would take time. It would take work. But for the first time, they were facing it together. Outside, the city buzzed with life, a world of endless possibilities stretching out before them. And as Ethan looked at his parents, the people who had shaped his life in ways he was only beginning to understand, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. They weren't just survivors of a broken family. They were builders of a new one. And this was only the beginning. The Blackwell family's journey was filled with shocking twists, heartbreak, and redemption. If you enjoyed watching this gripping story unfold, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more thrilling stories packed with drama, suspense, and powerful endings. Comment below and tell us, would you have forgiven Richard after everything that happened? Do you think the Blackwell family will truly heal, or will their past continue to haunt them? Let us know your thoughts, and don't forget to turn on notifications, so you won't miss our next story filled with even more jaw-dropping twists and emotional drama. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next chapter of unforgettable storytelling.